All right, we are back.
We are indeed, and we are really excited for some follow-up discourse. I know, I work a little bit with teens, and you do as well, Tiffany, sometimes, but I do work a lot with parents. And so today I'm pretty excited to discuss a little bit about parenting and different types of parenting, but we're going to focus a little bit more on toxic parenting and how that relates with childhood trauma. But before we get too far in, Tiffany, anything you want to highlight before we start to dive in?
I think the kind of big things I thought we would touch on slash unpack today are um when we're using the word toxic, we're not trying to point fingers for the sake of blame. We're only naming the patterns that are happening that are hindering emotional safety, identity development, and authentic connection within family systems. Um, So our ultimate goal isn't to condemn people, it isn't to blame people, it's more to name and identify what's going on. And some of the patterns that we're going to be touching on is narcissistic type parenting, enmeshment, and some parentification.
I want to know what you know about. So sorry, I have my own list of things, but I was like, yours sounds more interesting to me than mine. So can we talk about can we talk about enmeshment first? That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. So the enmeshment, or the AKA blurry boundary, that I call it. This usually happens when boundaries between parent and child are so blurred that emotional separation is experienced as betrayal. Parents may not be abusive in an overt way. In fact, they often might appear very loving, but that love sometimes is fused within within that control piece. Common phrases of this is "You're my best friend. I don't need anyone but you," or "How could you do this to me?" When you're simply setting a boundary or trying to grow into your own independence, can be really difficult. Children raised in this enmeshed dynamic often become emotional caretakers for their parents' feelings. I always kind of sometimes throw the phrase of like, "Oh, you're your parents' therapist." Um, can sometimes feel or look like that. There's very little room for individuals to explore their individual identity when this is happening, because the cost of separation is guilt and emotional punishment, and that can be really difficult to shoulder and burden. Um,
Okay.
yeah, a lot of other kind of things that might pop up if you're dealing with enmeshment is you might feel responsible for everyone's, including your parents' emotions. You might struggle with guilt when setting boundaries. You might avoid conflict to maintain that air quotes on peace. You might lose sight of who you are outside of relationships because you've become so enmeshed in caretaking. Um, with your parents. And it can be a really difficult process to set boundaries and start working towards becoming your own self without kind of falling into that like self abandonment uh, bubble.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I feel like Tiffany's always come up with the facts, and I do try to stay factual, but I just really love the info you bring to some of this, Tiffany. I would add or maybe expand on that. This is not just like, oh, okay, I went to college for the first semester, left home. Oh, this is hard. This could be like 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, feeling that enmeshment, feeling that challenge, like maybe even having your own kids or your own family, and still feeling that pull, or just even the maybe your parents being gone and still feeling those wounds. So there's a lot of different ways this can be felt. And so I appreciate such a strong platform, Tiffany, to kind of work from of what enmeshment could look like.
Yeah. And it's for sure is a spectrum, and it's one of those things where um it can be very strong at times and also lesser at times. Like if you move really far away, it might not feel as enmeshed with your family, but it could also be one of those things where you visit for the holidays and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like, this is overwhelming. I forgot how much energy it takes to be around my family members or parents or caregivers."
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, so enmeshment, anything else, Tiffany, you want to add for the enmeshed parentific, like the enmeshed parenting style or experience?
Mhm. I think the biggest thing that I see quite often is that process of like becoming your own emotional person can be really distressing. And there's going to be a lot of like tolerance building around the discomfort of saying no. Kind of no can be really hard for some individuals to say.
Mm, uh, yeah, that's some of this stuff today is a niche I wish wasn't needed, you know? Like, I mean, all the things we talk about with trauma, but yeah, just these wounds can happen. Even if you knew back, as a kid that it was wrong what was happening, or as an adult, like this isn't right or healthy, like you can know that and it still can hurt. And so I think sometimes there's a maybe blame on people like, well, why don't they know it's not right or what to do? But it's still your parents, still a loved one. It's someone that you care about. And like we're programmed to care about what our guardians and loved ones think or say about us, even if they're maybe not the healthiest persons.
Yeah, and I think that's the difficult part that individuals like can face frustration with is where you have some people, not to throw them under the bus or to say like what they're choosing in life is wrong, but some people are like, oh, just cut them out, like boom, that's easy, just don't talk to them. The family connections can be so much more complicated. Even if someone traumatized you and treated you like crap, there's that biological bond for some people of like, well, they're my parents. At least they didn't like put me in a box and float me down a river to die. They did at least do some effort. And it can be really complicated and complex to sort out those kind of like love-hate emotions within those complicated family dynamics.
Wow. 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 I'm excited. You also brought up narcissistic parents. Do you want to add any more or shift into that?
Yeah. So narcissistic parenting, and I just want to disclaim like we're not diagnosing anyone by talking about this. What we're talking about does not mean diagnosis. Anyone can show narcissistic tendencies from one time to another. Um,
Agreed.
so that being said, narcissistic parenting refers to a pattern of parenting where the child's identity and needs are eclipsed by the parent's ego, image, or emotional fragility. Oftentimes, you kind of exist as an extension of your parent rather than an individual in your own right. So, this can manifest usually in two different ways as either the golden child. So, a child is placed on a pedestal and raised as long as they reflect positively on the parent, or the scapegoat, when an individual is blamed or criticized when the parent needs to discharge their own shame or inadequacy somewhere. Um, so children raised in this way often learn like love is conditional. It's based on performance, perfection, or obedience. Their sense of self becomes fragile or performative based, always kind of asking themselves like, what do I do in order to be accepted? And I work a lot with this, and I see this is what I see day in and out is that chronic people pleasing, that fear of rejection or failure, that difficulty trusting their own emotions or needs, or feeling emotionally
Mm,
empty or unseen, just because they've been raised, whether it's intentional or not, in an environment where it's either performative based, or if they failed, it was destructive to like their independence and their autonomous growth. Um, and that's kind of where healing kind of starts, is like being able to start reclaiming your autonomy, learning that you're allowed to have needs, even if your parent couldn't meet them, and that your worth isn't tied to like being perfect or being productive.
wow. Wow. Yeah. It's interesting. We're recording this a little like the week after Chapel Roan has gone viral for saying some things that have people worked up about parenting. And the quote was like, she doesn't know any young parents who don't uh feel like they're in hell or said they're in hell, which is like so interesting because before Tiffany and I were recording this, I was joking about like, oh my gosh, I got up kind of thing. But it's interesting though, because like I can see that perspective. I think I'm a big Chapel Roan fan, which is not why we're here today. But I think sometimes she says things and they are taken out of context. But she was kind of trying to explain, like she sees what people are going through as parents, and just identifying like that's really hard, and maybe not for me. So that would mean that Chapel Roan is not a narcissist, and that she is really making an informed decision. Like, yeah, that seems really challenging. And I make that point of a narcissist, you're not basing it around kids or the family. It's based about you and your needs. So I mean, you'll see uh, very many examples of that. It's like, oh well, I have this appointment, so I'm going to go to that and miss the kids special day, or field trip, or whatever the case may be. It's very centered around them. And not that I am advocating that everything needs to be based around children, but like it would be odd. It kind of stands out how the organization is about the parent, not the kids. Like it would stand out. That's all I'm saying. No matter where you're coming from, it would stand out to the degree things are organized around the parent in one or both.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And it can also be intentional and it can be unintentional. There can be systems where like the parent's very aware of what they're doing, and there can be systems where like when you bring it up, parents like, holy crap, like this was just the way I was raised. I didn't realize it was so harmful.
Yeah. And that's frequently what I hear about is the issues of confronting parents as an adult and then not getting that closure. And so that is very a wound, I think, for a lot of these more toxic parenting styles. Is like there's these wounds created and we don't usually get the closure from the person that's created them. And so that can be very challenging and hurtful, especially if you're seeing them locally or still going to all these important family events, or feel obligated to keep a relationship even if it's not healthy for you.
Yeah, yeah, it can be difficult. I know there's a lot of acceptance work involved in that, and being able to recognize like it's okay to be angry at your parents and on some level blame them for things, but at the same time, like there's a lot of different factors that go into like what your parents experienced and whether or not their choice was to make a change. Not like in any shape or form like saying their behavior is acceptable or excusable, but just like they had their own journey they had to live, and being able to accept that like we can't forcibly make them change that.
Mm. One, I don't mean to keep steering us, but one of the other things you mentioned that I really like talking about is the parentification of children. But I feel like you've got some stuff cooked up for us there. Is it okay if we shift to that? Because this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about as far as like wounds, just because that's been more of my experience with my clients.
Yeah, no, we for sure can talk about parentification. It comes up often for me as well. I think the 2 points that I wanted to weave in later after we go through kind of your stuff is just the instrumental versus the emotional parentification.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate the discussion about the parentification because it's typically one or multiple kids and the family taking on more of like adulting or adult caretaker responsibilities. So making meals, um, making appointments, planning field trip. I mean, just truly like taking on a lot. It looks like a mini parent. And a great example of this that is so sad is the Duggar family. Like they sincerely had a pairing system where one of the older kids would basically like change diapers, get them ready in the morning, help them go to bed, and it was like just a built-in nanny for the kid. But so a lot of the adult Duggars now have come out and discussed like how draining that was and how hard it was. And so there's some really great books by the oldest daughters, and they're really well spoken about some of it. I should have looked up the books to plug, but I have seen this so often where if one of the parents has severe mental health issues or struggling with a disease of addiction, or maybe just not as able to handle some of the life demands, that this can shift, even if it's a one kid in the house or multiple kids, like taking on those responsibilities. And like once you turn that part of your brain on, it very rarely will turn off. So if you're like, oh, I wonder what's for dinner. Oh, what do we have in the house? Or oh, do I need to go try to? I mean, it can be very natural. And so I want to be clear, we're not shaming anyone who is struggling in this economy or having economic issues. It is more like being, 10-year-old and being like, oh, I wonder what I need to do to help with this. You're feeling that responsibility. Like helping is great, but feeling the responsibility, it's a lot of pressure on a young brain and nervous system.
Yeah, yeah. I think oh, there's a really good book. I say good, but I also wanna excuse me. Ugh, the yawns. But I also wanna put out there with a very, very strong disclaimer is it is a very, very, very graphic novel. And I don't mean that in like a picture way. I mean that in like a sexual abuse, childhood trauma type of way. The book's called Spilled Milk, and it's a
Mm,
personal recount of an individual who like had severe parentification, to the point to where like they were accepting abuse in order to feel like they were protecting their siblings. Like that was what they had to
wow.
do.
Wow. I can't imagine. I know there's some very powerful narratives out there. I also was just thinking about child actors and some of the toxic
Mm.
dynamics that can happen. I was just reading
Yeah.
about Macaulay Culkin and Kieran Culkin. His dad was banned from different sets because he was very pushy and demanding and aggressive and basically living off his kids
Hmm.
working. And so there's very strained relationships. So yeah, definitely a strange dynamic of like the kids being the main breadwinner and like everything revolving around that. That would be a
Ooh,
very unique dynamic.
that reminds me, maybe we could potentially do a plug on, I forget the actress's name that wrote the book. I'm Glad My Mom Died.
Oh yeah, it's I need to look up her. It's like McCurdy, but I need to look it up.
Yeah. I was like, McCurdy something. I can't remember her name,
Yeah,
but that was
Jeanette
a
McCurdy.
really
I should
good
have
book.
trusted myself. Yeah, she does have the book. I'm glad my mom died. That's a spicy read. So if you're feeling like you want to read that, she was abused by her mother and has survived and has used the book to try to talk through some of that, and that's been part of her healing journey. Um, so what some of the things I don't want to shift this too much, but I kind of looked up some things about like some of the signs of a toxic parent. So kind of like, if people were wanting to have a list or look through some things of like what could you look at, because I know we all make mistakes, but there's a mistake and then there's like a pattern and then there's a degree of mistake. So I thought that may be something we could talk about, but I don't want to steer us too far. Tiffany, before we go into that, what would you be okay if I kind of bring up some of the signs to look out for?
Yeah. I'm gonna wrap up parentification and then we can dive into that.
Yeah, that's
Um,
great.
so the other kind of notes to point out about parentification is that responsibility isn't inherently bad. Like many of us grew up with chores or had to help out, things of that nature. We want to be clear that parentification crosses the line when it robs a child of the right to just be a child. So like instrumental parentification, like when a child has to handle physical tasks like cooking, cleaning, managing finances, or caring for their siblings, would be crossing a line that prevents them from just being a child, or that emotional parentification, when a child becomes the confidant, the therapist, or the emotional support system for a parent, essentially reversing the roles, where then the child is the parent and having to do all the hard things and the parent is not. Um, and this kind of goes into rolling us into the symptoms, but there's some hyper independence, some burnout, difficulty receiving care, trusting others, a deep sense of unworthiness unless they're being helpful to people, or just the guilt for need to rest or setting boundaries whenever you've had that role reversal and you are a parent as a child instead of an actual like child.
Wow. It's like it's a very light. It's not a light topic, is it? Just something with a lot of layers. And so, thanks, Tiffany, for just kind of giving us some of those definitions, so we can maybe all be more on the same page as we're discussing some of this today.
Yeah. So you're gonna hit us with some symptoms. What does it look like?
Yeah. So, and I should throw like I will do my best to qualify some of the definitions here as well as Tiffany is doing. But just first off, like, how do toxic parents act? They're verbally abusive. Belittling, criticizing, dismissing a child's feelings. Like, those are toxic behaviors. So, being sarcastic one time or sassy, like, that really could be verbal abuse, especially depending on the age or level. Typically, you would see patterns of this. So I don't want to guilt all the parents that may be listening that, you can't have a slip up here or there, but there's a difference between a slight miss of what you said and actually saying something with the intent to hurt, or doing that consistently.
Mhm.
Physical violence and physical abuse, so trying to air quote teach a lesson, those would be signs of toxic parenting. Emotional or physical abuse, and I think we've discussed that in great detail. But you don't have to be a narcissist for this one, but putting your own needs first. So that's one of the things I think it's a very interesting time to be alive as we talk about individuality and um, workload, cognitive load, and different dynamics and parenting and what is going. But it's strange to see someone not prioritize their kids. Kids are not able to advocate for themselves, so it's very strange to see someone not putting those needs first or their family's needs first and putting their own. I don't know. I have a picture of someone going to buy a new PlayStation 5, but there's only a couple things of ramen at the house type of scenario, or not trying to prioritize developmental milestones, worrying about something silly. I'm gonna roast my own group, like gamers or something, because I like to game. It's like, oh well, my Fortnite streak is great, but oh yeah, there's no clean laundry for my kid. That could be an example of some of that selfishness. Overly controlling, sexually inappropriate, harsh discipline and punishment, being jealous of their own child. So, sometimes you hear of situations where a parent is jealous of the relationship that the child has with the other parent and the attention. So those would be a sign. That would be a sign of a toxic pattern. Rigidity, being too rigid, um, very self-absorbed, not supportive, easily offended, don't respect boundaries, and they share private matters with others. So sharing information that's not age appropriate. This is a pretty classic one, like sharing very adult information with a young child or sharing very personal information with an outsider with the intent to embarrass them. And that is kind of leads into the next one of embarrassing, just seeking to embarrass your child, like not just doing it on accident, but genuinely seeking to do so.
Mm.
And one of the last ones that I think should be addressed is emotional outburst, usually unprovoked and out of nowhere. As you can probably figure out, toxic parents are emotionally immature. And so some of the outbursts can be out of nowhere in an attempt to control the situation. And, kids can respond to this of a fear of those outbursts. So almost like without even needing it to be said, finding ways of minimizing. So I've had so many clients where they would seek to keep dad happy or mom happy or do different things just to keep the peace or keep it going because they wanted to avoid what happens when there was one of those outbursts. Any other signs, Tiffany, you'd want to add or go on? As like I just wanted to give us that general overview, dive in a little bit to some of the interesting points.
Yeah, I think I think the big ones that I had, and it kind of wraps in with what you were saying, like they tend to use shame over being a guide when they're a parent. They don't
Mhm.
respect children's boundaries. That's one that like I'm not getting to my soapbox, but that's one that like really irks me is like I've encountered individuals who are like, "Well, they're my kids. They have to respect me no matter what." I'm like, That's not how that works." Like, sure, there's some level of mutual respect to be between like parent and child, but like if you're not respecting their boundaries, like you're role modeling the fact that they don't have to respect yours. And then yeah.
Yeah. And we've talked a lot about the impact, but we've talked in previous episodes about the ACE score, which is the adverse childhood experiences, and looking at childhood trauma. But what are maybe some of the physical and mental effects of being exposed to toxic parenting or a dysfunctional family? High risk of developing other mental health disorders like depression, anxiety, struggles with executive functioning, more likely to seek and have abusive relationships in the future, risk of PTSD, but just even physically, a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, low self-esteem, increased tendencies of self-harm or suicidality, weakened immune systems, and struggle to establish healthy support systems. So um, that's a quite wide-ranging impact. If there was anything I could throw out that would help all of those things, it would be a great coping skill, and something we would be pushing. So, you know, I'm not aware of a coping skill that could do all of that. I mean, we were looking at the stress of it. So I mean, it's quite a powerful thing. So, this isn't like a snake oil or uh, something that's kind of silly. It's something that can really have a negative impact and have a
Mhm.
big disruption. And
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead, Tiffany.
I was agreeing with you. Like there is a like really negative impact, and I think at least from the personal work that I do, a lot of what I see is that low self-esteem, that like I'm not worth anything, like thought processes that are wrapped up in that anxiety and depression, and that like no confidence, no emotional intelligence, all of those like more underlying kind of hidden.
But I don't like to leave people on red. And so one of the things just with my last kind of piece today, I wanted to maybe give some suggestions or interventions for how to deal with toxic parents. So um, I will say that, this is probably more for our adult listeners. I don't know if we have any teenage listeners, but that a lot of this could be things that's harder for them or having to get this information to teens or kids, but setting boundaries and sticking to them. So, if you're going to say, you're not going to speak to my children about this, you're not going to speak to me this way, setting that boundary and then enforcing means like, well, if you're not going to discuss things at that volume or you're not going to do it, I'm going to leave or I'm going to discuss a different topic. Um, you have to let them be your own boundaries and not letting other people pick them for you. But the quickest thing I'll say about boundaries, they're only as good as the ones you're going to keep. So if you have no intent to keep some of them, no judgment, but don't judge yourself that you said you had a boundary that you maybe didn't have a real intention of keeping. Knowing that your feelings are valid. A lot of this is gaslighting or breadcrumbing sometimes of trying to play with our emotions or manipulate our emotions. So knowing how you feel about the situation is valid. And also one that we kind of talk a lot about as therapists, we can't change people. So don't try to change them. You genuinely can't. If you've had this parentification happen, when you've had the parenting role, it could almost feel natural to want to go back and say, hey, that's not good. Trying to avoiding that, be realistic about those unhealthy expectations, be very guarded with what you share with them, find a support system, detach, have kindness for yourself. And these last two are probably my favorite. Have some regular self care, not waiting until you are triggered about something with your family. Finding some of those outlets, those things that can rejuvenate you. And then if some of these wounds linger, maybe talking to a therapist about some of the things you're noticing, some of the challenges. Not everyone needs therapy, but on situations like this, it probably is more helpful than not to have a therapist to maybe speed the process along. And Tiffany, any suggestions maybe you would give to someone working through some of these pieces?
Yeah, for sure would as default, my first line of defense would be therapy for sure. I love doing the inner child work, the healing your that younger version, the reparenting your inner child. Um, Great ways to like start helping like your inner critic understand that like the way you were raised, um, it's okay to be mad about it. It's okay to change it, um, and like heal yourself moving forward. The biggest thing, boundary setting. Um, Boundaries are just so important, and being able to have support and setting those boundaries so you can work towards a healthier you is super important.
And it's not selfish. It's never selfish to want to take care of yourself. I know we're talking about selfishness, but if you have
Yeah.
wounds from some of
Oh my
these things,
gosh.
you're not selfish because you're wanting to deal with some of these things. And that's frequently how it's labeled. It's like, well,
Yes.
wasn't a problem back then, and why is it a problem now? Or, can't you just, you get to decide what your boundaries are. You get to decide what you're willing to do and not willing to do. And it's not selfish. That is like probably the most frequent attack I hear my clients having to deal with. It's like, you're
Mhm.
selfish, you're selfish, you're
Oh
selfish.
my gosh. That one drives me crazy. I always remind people the way to look at it is like you charge your phone every night, right? Or whenever you go to bed. Let's say to go to bed because not everyone works a 9 to 5. But you plug your phone in every day to charge it. Would you consider that selfish, the fact that you want to have your
Oh my
phone every day
gosh.
and being accessible? No,
Dang,
you
that's
wouldn't
so
consider it
good.
selfish.
That's
So, like,
so good. Why are we not using that more often? Or maybe other therapists are. So I know what I'm going to be spreading. That's awesome.
yeah, I mean, we don't consider ourselves selfish for wanting to have our phone and be accessible. So there's absolutely no, like, I say there's absolutely no reason, easy to say, a lot harder to do when you're feeling that way. But like, it's not selfish to plug yourself in and recharge by doing what is healthy for you.
Hmm. Wow. I feel like I'm inspired. I don't know. We always record lives, but I'm excited. I like that. It's not selfish to plug your phone in. Like, but that's such a powerful thing because it's like if your phone's about to die and you plug it, it's like you're so selfish. It's like, wait,
Yeah,
what?
like that's the way I phrase it with people. I'm like, "Oh,
That's
like
so
would you
good.
it like it's one of those things. It's like to me it's no different. Like if you are making yourself that accessible, what's so bad about plugging yourself in and recharging yourself so you can stay consistently that accessible?" Yeah. My spicy takes on things.
I love it. I mean, I feel like it's nice to get to talk a little bit about the healing and some of the shifts that can happen because I think a lot of the time we just don't get to do some of that. Like we don't get to maybe notice the growth or the options. And so that's really why, Tiffany and I started this was to focus on some of the healing or allow some of the options for growth. Um, Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm a little out of it, guys. I apologize. It may feel like a squirrel distraction recording today. I apologize. I try not to come too caffeinated, but I may be thinking I didn't come caffeinated enough.
Hey, again, just you've got spring fever.
I Sure. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know I had it yesterday where I was just like, I'm not lifing today.
I feel it.
So, are there any other topic points, things you wanted to cover today, nuggets of wisdom you would want to leave with our listeners?
Now, honestly, it's gonna seem lame, but I would so focus on that image of plugging in your phone and that not being selfish. Like that is probably, I feel like, one of the most powerful takeaways. And I'm not too proud to admit that it's been a long time if I've heard that, or if I did, I did not recall it. But that is such a great image to talk about how this is not selfish. And I'm probably going to use that um, many times this week with some of my patients. So I would just throw that out there. So thank you, Tiffany, for being willing to share that genuinely.
Yeah. Maybe I can make everyone like a little sticker. Plug yourself in.
I always need another sticker for my laptop. So absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you, Tiffany? Any last takeaways or points to make?
Um, I just want to thank everyone for allowing us to hold some space and holding some space with us today. If today's episode resonated with you, we invite you to reflect. Send us an email, reach out to us on Patreon. We're happy to connect with you guys, answer any questions, maybe do a Q&A. The biggest thing I want to leave you guys with is you're allowed to become someone your past never had. And recognizing like you're allowed to be the person for yourself that you needed to have.
Mm,
Yeah. Until next time, guys.